Hey guys, so we've got the amazing Chris Childs here with us today, just talking bass and his journey through music and all that good stuff. So, how did it all start for you, Chris?
Well, many years ago, probably about 176 years ago, I started playing guitar. My brother was a singer in a band, and that was basically what got me into it because he was my idol,
Nice.
and that was all I ever wanted to do. So when I was about 12, I guess, my parents got me a 6-string guitar, and I learned to play it. And then I quickly realised that there were more guitarists in the local area, Chelmsford, where I come from, than there were bass players. So I decided when I was about 15 or 16 to start playing bass, which I did, and never looked back, really. I was always in bands with people much older than me.
Okay.
Sort of once I started playing bass. Actually, we should introduce one of the photos of me when I was playing guitar as a very young man. I was always the guitarist and the lead singer in my little school bands, and we did quite a few gigs there.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, I changed to actually let's have another look at one of these photos. This was this one here was just after I left school, I guess. Still rehearsing in the school common room.
Oh,
They were very
wicked.
good like that.
Yeah.
With my homemade bass.
Yeah.
And it was a short scale bass. I can't remember for the life of me what make it was or what the original body looked like, but I always wanted a Rickenbacker, so I used the neck and built a Rickenbacker body. And I'm sure it was
wicked.
absolutely terrible. I'm sure it was. And I've no idea, like most of my gear throughout the 70s, I've no idea what happened to it.
Yeah.
It just kind of disappeared somewhere.
Yeah.
I used to have a Selmer treble and bass 50. I used to have a Watkins copycat, which are really
amazing.
collectible now.
Yeah.
And I've no idea where it went. They just went.
Yeah.
But, so started playing bass when I was about 16. Got into Butlin's bands, top rank bands, and I did that for a few years, which is, it's a really good grounding.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn the songs as they are, and you have to play them the same every night. So it gives you a good discipline in making sure you're playing the same thing and not sort of straying from what you're doing, which is quite an important thing.
Yeah.
So like we were discussing earlier,
Yeah.
if you're going to learn a song, for me, you learn it how the original bass player played it.
Including all the little parts.
Yeah. And
100%.
getting the sound right and everything.
Yeah.
So doing stuff like that, doing residencies, playing like top 40 stuff, was a really good sort of base, for learning.
So what sort of era was that, would you say?
That was, actually, it was a fantastic era for bass playing because it was late 70s.
Yeah.
So you got
wicked.
Chic, you got Brothers Johnson, you got all of these bands with fantastic bass players
definitely.
in. And that was, that was what I was doing. In fact, I should have tried to find, there was a photo of me at Butlin's with my beautiful red satin suit.
Oh,
it was
lovely.
amazing. And that wasn't the worst one. There was one which was also satin, but a blue shirt and bright lime green
Oh, nice.
flared trousers. Amazing.
Amazing.
I do wish I had it now.
Yeah. you should get some made.
I should. I don't think I'll wear it on stage. I might wear it in the bedroom.
Yeah. Very nice. So what was you playing back then? What was your basic choice on those gigs?
Well, I never had any money, so I never had expensive guitars. Let's see if I can find that one is that was one of my first basses that I bought from a guitarist friend of mine, and I think I've just been doing a bit of research into it. I think it was a Matsumoto, Japanese, copy of a Jazz. So I played that for years and years. I changed it. I changed the pickups on it. I stripped it all back and put veneer on it.
Oh, wow.
Changed loads, and I changed the machine heads on it. But that went with me for years and years until I think the first Fender I bought, or first name bass I bought, was a Jazz when I got the gig with Thunder. Because prior to that, I'll step back a bit. I worked with Go West for a short while, and they bought me a Status 5-string.
Oh, nice.
Very, very early Status 5-string. I think it was number 32. and I sold it years ago. So if anyone out there in Bassland has a Status Headless Series 2 5-string, serial number 32, I'd like it back, please.
We're going to hunt you down.
Yes. I would give you some money for it, but, you know, I just like to get it back. You should never sell basses. You should never sell them because you always regret it. Anyway, so, yeah, the first time I bought a bass was a black Fender Jazz to do the Thunder gig. And I've still got that. Again, I wasn't happy with the way it looked. I had it stripped back and painted Olympic white with to look like Flea's Jazz. That was white. That was white.
Nice. So you're going back a bit. What was your first sort of big gig? What was your first sort of big break when it comes to bass playing?
No, that's a good question. I've worked with loads and loads of people. What would my first big gig have been? Well, I actually, as we were discussing earlier, I was telling you a little story about when Mick Ralph's parted company with Bad Company. He put together his own band and did an album. He was going to be touring it, and I got put forward for the audition. So I went up and Mick was there. It was a place called Nomis Studios in London, which the older members of the bass playing community might remember that. It was owned by Simon Napier Bell, which is what's called Nomis, Simon backwards, and everybody rehearsed there. Everybody.
Amazing.
So I went up to Nomis, and there was Mick there, and I was a Bad Company fan, so it was good for me. And Chris Slade was playing drums for the audition, who later went on to play with AC/DC. But during the audition, who should come in but Dave Gilmour and have a jam. And, you know, that was kind of one of my first introductions to, like, the big time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as I'd said earlier, that was probably one of the big mistakes I made during my career, of not taking the gig, because that could have led on to other things. And also, prior to that, stepping back again, when I was around, I guess, 17 or 18, a guitarist that I was playing with, I still can't remember his name. It's gone. I do apologise, whatever your name was. But he was playing with a guitarist in Ipswich called Nick Kershaw. They had a band together called Hog, and I went and auditioned for them. And at the time, I didn't fancy the idea of driving from Chelmsford to Ipswich in my mum's little Wolseley Hornet with my cabinets in the back. So I said, actually, Nick, I don't really fancy doing that gig. And I probably should have done. I probably should have taken that gig, because I could.
By the mid-'80s, it was a big deal.
Yeah, you know.
Live Aid,
all of that,
all that stuff,
and he made some of my favourite albums. You know, they're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, they're great.
So yeah, that was two big mistakes in my life. I'm sure there's been more, but yeah, they were the two notable ones.
Yeah. So you mentioned Go West. So how did that come about?
I was working with a singer called Robert Hart, who very, very dear friend of mine, who went on to sing with Bad Company, and he now sings for Man from Man's Earth Band. Unbelievable singer. We were with the same management as Go West, and they needed an entire band. They just recorded Dancing on the Couch, and they needed to fill the shoes of the whole band. So they needed a drummer, bass player, and a keyboard player. So I got put forward to it, along with a good friend of mine who's a drummer. And we went and rehearsed for about a month and a half, I think, while Pete and Rick were out in Denmark finishing off the album.
Okay.
And I played on one of the tracks, a song called I Want to Hear It From You, which subsequently became the first single off that album.
Okay.
And then and then the tour, it was a world tour. It was a year world tour, £1,000 a week, which back in the 80s was pretty good money. So I thought, hey, you know, this is going to be the making of it.
Yeah.
And then between the rehearsals finishing and the tour starting, they decided they wanted to change the band around again. So off I went. But they very kindly bought me a Status 5-string, which is in this photo here.
We'll drop these photos in for you guys so you can see them as well.
Yeah. So that was the status I was talking about,
Amazing.
032. But what's interesting about that that photo, apart from my hair, which is really interesting,
Mine will be there soon.
and you know,
I'm getting there.
yeah.
Slowly.
I seem to have an inordinately big forehead in that photo as well. But the amplification in the photo, the story behind that is a good friend of mine, Stuart Watson, designed the original Trace Elliot amps. So if any of the older members of the community remember the original Trace Elliots, the real big chunky things, Stuart designed all of those. And then he had a passing of the ways with Trace Elliot and decided to design his own stuff called Decimax, which is what this stuff was. And it was way, way ahead of its time, because Stuart is an absolute genius. He really is. Quietest man you'll ever meet, but a genius. And it was a programmable digital amp.
Is that the EQ side of it? Kind of?
I think it's a 12-band programmable
Wow.
EQ. So you had, like, I can't remember how many memory locations, loads and loads. So you could program loads and loads of different EQ curves.
Wow.
And it had a separate manual EQ as well. So it was a really flexible amp.
Wicked.
But unfortunately, it never took off. For whether it was just ahead of its time or what, I don't know. I don't know.
I guess Trace Elliot was still quite a big brand at the time as well.
They'd gone massive by that point. You know, they were kind of the market leader, because when I first started working for Trace Elliot, and I used to, like, screw the speakers into the cabinets, it was just in a little shop in Romford called Soundwave, and that was where the Bass Centre was born as well. Fred Friedline, the guy who owned Trace Elliot, which was originally a PA company, he decided he wanted to build, because at the time there was only really Sun, an acoustic, an Ampeg that were out there. He decided he wanted to build something that would be the world leader in bass amplification, all military grade components, everything like completely unbreakable, massive, louder than everything else, which he did. Yeah. And, you know, it became...
Sounds so
what
good.
It became.
Still sounds great now.
It does, yeah. I've still got an original GP11.
Have you?
I have.
Oh, amazing.
All the little faders are broken off, so you have to kind of put your finger in.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good sound.
Absolutely amazing. Did you use that stuff back then as well?
I did, yeah. I used the Trace Elliot for quite a... I mean, I've had so many bloody amps over the years. You know, I'm very fickle. I really am. I have to try different things and play different things all the time. So I actually don't know how many amps I've got in my collection, but I've probably got rid of as many as I've got. I used to have an Ampeg SVT3, you know, the one and it wasn't right. It had a valve in it. It was a solid state output, I think, but it had a valve in it, and it never sounded quite right. And I came to the conclusion that the bias on it was wrong. So it needed a tweak. And so I did a bit of research on it, and it said you can actually adjust the bias, but we don't recommend you do it because it can have fatal results. And I thought, well, I work for Trace Elliot. I used to put the amps together. You know, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah. So I got my little screwdriver and tweaked it, played it, and it sounded unbelievable for 30 seconds, and it caught fire.
Oh, my God.
It was brilliant. But for that 30 seconds, it was the best sounding amp in the world.
Yeah, amazing. So you did the Go West thing for a few months or something, was it, did you say? Yeah,
well, literally. I never got to do any shows with them, unfortunately. I rehearsed with a wonderful guitarist, Alan Murphy, for a couple of months, and that was just spectacular. Yeah. At the time, I've been doing sessions in Cardiff, TV sessions. I was like the go-to session guy in Cardiff for a good few years. So I explained earlier, I kind of took over from Pino. He was the go-to guy. Then he moved up to London and started doing everything he was doing. Yeah. So I was doing that. Then I got the Go West gig, and prior to that, this is one of those unfortunate things that happens during your career. I'd done a couple of albums with Andy Summers from The Police.
Oh, amazing.
First one was with Robert Fripp. It was an album called Parade. So it was just basically a load of guitar solos and me making a horrible noise. And another of Andy's solo albums called Advanced Masked. No, it wasn't. Anyway, one of his solo albums. So I'd done a bit of work with him. And just after I'd got the gig with Go West and started rehearsing with them, he called me up and he said, I've got a tour coming up. Do you fancy doing it? And I said, well, I'm really sorry, mate, but I've got the gig with Go West. He said, oh, fair enough. And then, of course, I got the Spanish Archer from Go West.
Yeah.
And by that time, Andy's tour was, we'd got somebody doing it. So it's one of those things that happens,
Yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah.
I wasn't best pleased at the time, I can tell you,
I bet.
as you can imagine.
At least you got free bass.
I did get a free bass and then sold it like an idiot.
We do these things, don't we, along the way?
We do.
So that's sort of mid to late 80s.
Yeah. And then, that was kind of early 80s. Yeah, mid 80s, I guess. But then I got involved with a band called Waterfront. I was living in Cardiff at the time, and it was these two guys. Singer sounded just like George Michael. So it was kind of pop stuff. And they got signed to, I can't remember who it was, but we made the record in America. We went to Los Angeles and recorded it in Rumbo Recorders with Ron Levison, who'd done shitloads of work in the past with various different acts, which was great. And then the album got released. The single went up to number 10 in the American charts, which is quite something. Did loads and loads of TV stuff like Eggs and Bacon with Cheryl Baker, who I was completely in love with at the time. You might be a bit too young to remember Cheryl Baker, but
I recognise the name.
she was a singer with Making Your Mind Up.
Again, I know.
Somebody will be able to tell me.
Yeah.
Writing on a postcard. And then we did a 3-month tour of America, which was my first big tour.
Big tour.
And it was good. We were supporting Donny Osmond.
Oh wow!
Which was brilliant. It was pretty grueling, but it was a great experience. And then after that, I just started doing loads of sessions because early 90s there was a lot of session work about. Because obviously this was before the advent of DAWs and home studios, and if you wanted to make a record, you had to go into the studio.
Yeah.
So I did. I started working for a couple of producers. Did tracks for Helen Terry, but various other people that I got sort of roped in to do session work with, and then early 90s, I decided I needed to sort of do a bit more work, so I started auditioning for people, and I auditioned for Bananarama, which you might not remember.
I do know.
I didn't get the gig. I learned all the songs, but I still didn't get it. And I auditioned for Gary Glitter. And I didn't get the gig, which may be a good thing because, my life could have taken a whole different path.
It could have done, for sure.
So, and then shortly after that, I auditioned for a band called Thunder, who at the time I'd actually never heard of. Oh, no, sorry. Prior to that, I was working with a singer called Mark Shaw from a band called Then Jericho.
Okay.
And he also had Andy Taylor from Duran Duran in the band.
Interesting.
And we did a tour, and the guitarist from Thunder actually came to one of the shows. Luke Morley, he came to one of the shows in Birmingham, so I got to meet him there. But the funny thing was, the manager of Then Jericho knew the management of Thunder. They were quite closely tied up, and I said, put a word in for me. And this guy, our manager, said, "Oh, you'll never get that gig. They're big time. You'll never get that gig." Okay. So anyway, they needed a bass player, and so I went to audition for them, and I didn't get the gig first audition. They chose somebody else, but then a couple of weeks later, they phoned me up and said, "Can you audition again?" And I did get the gig, and the rest, as they say, is history, because I did it for 28 years.
Yeah.
And had the best time, because they were just lovely guys. It was always easy, recording, rehearsing, touring, traveling.
Yeah.
It was just easy. And they had the best fans and made a lot of good music and played some great gigs.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You're saying you're doing some big gigs with those guys?
Oh yeah, we did download 2 or 3 times, I think. Wacken, pretty much all of the big festivals, and we never got to tour the States, which was a bit of a shame because if anyone knows anything about Thunder, early 90s, before I joined, the future was looking very, very bright for them. They were signed up to do a tour with Van Halen.
Oh wow!
In America, which and their singles were on what was known as heavy rotation on MTV at the time, which kind of guaranteed you a hit. So anyway, they were going to do this stateside tour with Van Halen, which would have broken them, no doubt.
Yeah.
The night before they were due to fly out, the manager phoned up and said, "Unpack your bags, lads, because grunge is happening."
Oh wow!
The tour is tanking. Oh, shouldn't do that. Sorry, Mike. The tour is tanking, so nobody wants to know classic rock music anymore because it's all about Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and blah, blah, blah.
Nirvana and all that stuff.
Yeah, so that was the end of Thunder in America, and they never toured there.
Wow. And did you ever play there at all?
No, I think we did one charity gig there because in fact, the whole band were involved with a charity called Childline Rocks, which was the fundraising side of Childline.
Yeah. And
every year there would be a motorbike ride to raise money, and at the end of it we would play, and we did one full-on gig. And I ended up playing with 3 bands that night because there was Thunder, another band I was playing with, which was a spin-off of Thunder called The Union, and then there was a singer called Marina V who was on first, and she didn't have a band with us. So in the afternoon, I learnt her songs. Me and the drummer learnt her songs and played with her as well. So played with 3 people on one gig. That was good fun.
Amazing.
Don't remember much about it, I've got to tell you.
A big blur. But is there any sort of memorable gigs over the years that stand out for you?
You know what? There is one particular one. As I was saying, Thunder were closely associated with Childline. And for a couple of years, we did a fundraiser at the Indigo.
Wow.
Where Thunder was like the house band, and there would be various other people brought in to do guest spots, and they would either do it as a full band or they would play with us. And there was Lulu, there was Russ Ballard, Roger Daltrey, Marillion did it, Uriah Heep, guys from the Darkness, but. And this is probably the high point of my entire career, and I don't expect it to be surpassed by anyone. I played Child in Time with John Lord. I don't know if you're a Deep Purple fan, but anybody who's a Deep Purple fan will know Child in Time and will know John Lord. And I stood on the stage next to him and played this fucking song. And I'm telling you, it's never going to get any better than that for me.
Absolutely amazing.
It was just... well, like I say, it's never going to get any better than that. And he was the nicest man. We were talking earlier about people being nice. He was the nicest, funniest man you'd ever hope to meet. Yeah. And of course, I was a massive Deep Purple fan.
Yeah.
There was one other time which sticks in my memory, and this wasn't a gig. This was a studio session. I played with a band called Lone Rider, which was myself. Steve Overland, the singer from FM, Steve Morris, who's a guitarist from Gillan, and Simon Kirke from Bad Company and Free. And we did this album, which was basically a Bad Company pastiche. And we were recording it. The first album we did, we were all in this little studio in Worcestershire. And one of the songs was pretty much All Right Now. It wasn't All Right Now, but it was as close to All Right Now as you're ever going to get. So anyway, Simon had just put his drum track down. So we sat there, a pair of us in the control room listening to it. And I said, oh hang on, I'm just going to plug my bass in. And can you go into record? Because I've just got this idea. I want to put it down quickly. So I'm playing away. And I said, okay, you know, that's all I need. And Simon said, no, carry on. I'm loving this, man. So there I am, playing something that's as close as you're ever going to get to All Right Now with the drummer who played on All Right Now.
Amazing.
Going, I'm loving what you're playing.
Oh, that's so cool.
Thanks, Simon.
Absolutely
I did enjoy that, mate. we've ended up doing 3 Lone Rider albums, and unfortunately, the second 2 were, the first one was during lockdown, so we all did it remotely, and recording remotely is, it's a good idea. I don't know if you've done any.
Yeah, I've done a little bit.
It has its uses, but to be honest, there's nothing like being together in the studio.
The feeling of it.
Yeah. And it all gets a bit insular and a bit, you tend to get introverted and overplay, and it wasn't anywhere near as good, because with a drummer like Simon, you need to be sat next to him, because he moves it around, he pushes and pulls, and you can't quantize it. It is what it is, and that's the beauty of his playing.
That moment of it together.
It's got the movement, it's got the breath, and it's got the air, and it's got the push and pull, and you try and quantize that and put it on a grid. It don't work. It's not Simon anymore.
Yeah.
So so the subsequent albums weren't quite as good. Although I got to say the most recent one was, and not only that, I got a couple of songs on it, which because I've been doing a lot of writing recently.
Are you enjoying the writing as well?
I absolutely love it. I don't. I find it quite difficult, especially lyrics. To come up with lyrics, I have to work very, very hard. But I've been writing a lot for a country singer, New Zealand country singer called Miranda Easton, and she's covered one of my songs already. And I sent her one before at the end of last year, which was a complete anomaly. Like I say, normally it takes me hours and hours of like agonising over lyrics, but this one just came out like in minutes, and she's recorded it. I did the bass part of it, but she's recorded it and got quite a high-end mix engineer to do it, and I think she's going to do a video of it. So hopefully that's going to be her next single. So I'm very pleased about that, because it's got quite an emotional attachment to me. I wrote it about my mum and dad. And to be honest, it was the weirdest thing. When I was writing it, I was sobbing my eyes out.
Oh, really?
Oh, the whole time I was writing it. So maybe there'll be something that gets conveyed in the final recording that it's got an echo of the. Yeah. Maybe it'll resonate with people the same way as it did with me. Who knows? Yeah. Songs are strange things, aren't they?
Yeah, you can relate to it in a different way, can't you? Mm. So is that sort of the most present thing you're doing at the moment?
No, I'm involved with, since Thunder aren't doing anything anymore, I'm just trying to spread myself around as much as possible. If anybody ever says, can you, I go, yep, before I even realise what it is. Yeah. So consequently, I'm playing with a band called Guitar Heads, which is brilliant. It's the drummer from Thunder, Harry, Jim Kirkpatrick from FM, and a complete unknown, or hitherto to me unknown, guitarist called Paul Rose, who is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I couldn't believe I'd never heard of him before. And we're just trying to build it up. We did some recording at Rockfield and did some videos, which you might want to include.
Yeah, we'll do
and we're just doing shows and slowly building it up. I've played with a band called ATAC, which was an old friend of mine, Keith ATAC, doing original, which sounded like Mark III Deep Purple. So we had a singer called Lee Small who sounded just like Glenn Hughes.
Wicked.
Keyboard player called Nick Foley, a good friend of mine from just up the road, who is a complete John Lord clone. He won't play anything but Hammond organ with a Leslie. And a great drummer called Bob Richards, a good friend of mine from South Wales. And I played with a band called the Americana Review, which is basically what it says on the tin. It's all Americana. Yeah. And I did with a few other bands. So basically, I try and do as much different stuff as possible. Yeah. I like playing all. One of the most enjoyable gigs I've done is an ABBA tribute, because
them bass lines are great,
unbelievable,
absolutely,
aren't they? Yeah, they're just so much fun to play. Yeah. Now I played with a band called Uncle Funk's Disco Inferno, which was all 70s and 80s, great tunes, and they're just such fun to play. Yeah. The outfit was, however, interesting.
Lots of sparkles.
Lots of well, the trousers that they supplied were about 4 sizes too big for me. So, and they were spandex. like black spandex with orange flames and massive great flares. So basically they came, I had to pull them up to about there. And in order to keep them up, the bass player, a good friend of mine, Mike Brooks, you might have come
Mike.
across him.
Yeah, we know Mike.
Everybody knows Mike.
Yeah.
He's the best guy.
Yeah, he's great.
It's his regular gig. So he said, you might want to bring some braces. So spandex trousers up to there, braces, and then a belt to put the radio pack on, because it's all in ears.
Yeah.
And then over the top of that goes this sparkly black shirt, so that hides up all the horror that's underneath.
Yeah.
But I know what's going on underneath. And then a massive headdress. And the
Brilliant.
first gig I did with them was at the O2 at some kind of I don't know what kind of gig it was. There's loads of people there anyway,
Yeah.
and we got introduced. I'm a rock Disco Inferno, and I was the first one to walk out on stage. So there I am walking out, picked up my bass, forgot that I got the headdress on, and of course strap over, entangled in the headdress. So there I'm like in ears, headdress, strap.
Brilliant.
It wasn't the best, the most like graceful entrance to the stage you could have
Yeah, of
hoped for.
course.
But a great gig, you know, really
Yeah,
good
yeah.
fun.
No, that's great. You said you're doing some teaching as well.
I do. I lecture at BIMM in Birmingham, which is absolutely brilliant. I love it. Just being able to pass on some of the knowledge that I've picked up over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
You know, and what I try and give them, as well as what's on the curriculum and what's in the module, it's just some of the stuff that they're going to need.
Like the real world.
Yeah,
stuff.
when they get out there, because you know it's a tough old place, and I just try and give them, you know, as many shortcuts and as many just hints as to what they're likely to encounter as I possibly can. And hopefully it will go in, and just at some point they'll get into a situation where they'll think, he said that, I know what to do.
It's like a rescue thing.
Yeah, and
100%.
you know, and if I can, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I've been doing a PG Cert, which is like a master's level degree in teaching, which has taught me so much about. And to be honest, the whole thing of teaching has been a real, you know, because as I explained earlier, I've got no background in academia. I never went to university, so especially at my age, it's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
You know, and writing a 6,000 word portfolio, it's something I couldn't.
Do you find that you're learning as well at the same time?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's great.
And you know, I wouldn't have rapided so much 10 years ago, because I'm naturally quite a conservative, quiet person. But I found that, you know, since teaching, I just find it easier to talk to people. And also moving up to the West Midlands as well, where everybody talks to each other.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
coming from Essex, nobody talks to anyone, you know.
Yeah, interesting.
So, it's been quite a testing time over the past few years with the singer from Thunder, Danny. He had quite a severe brain injury, and we nearly lost him. So obviously that put a complete halt to anything related to Thunder, which was a real shame, because just prior to that, we'd done one of our biggest tours, all arenas. You know, we did Wembley Arena, Birmingham Resorts World, and we'd had arguably the best album that we'd ever made. So, you know, things were looking great. And then all of a sudden it's like...
Yeah, that must be hard.
It was horrific, to be honest. And not losing the work wasn't really the worst of it. It was the thought of possibly losing one of my best mates, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm still working with Luke, because he's done a couple of solo albums. He played bass on them because he loves playing bass.
Oh,
he's
right.
actually a really good bass player. So
good.
there's Luke Morley from Thunder, who's a songwriter and guitarist. And we did a tour last year, and we're doing another one later on this year, which will be great fun. And it's not at all like Thunder. Doesn't sound like Thunder at all. It sounds more like Tom Petty. You know, it's quite Americana. You know, it's real interesting stuff.
What sort of size venues are you going to be doing with that?
Oh,
with that
only small clubs.
Yeah,
you know.
Nice though.
Oh, brilliant!
Nice and intimate.
Absolutely brilliant.
So what about bass guitars then? So what are you using at the moment?
Well, funny you should ask. As you may know, I recently purchased a Dingwall Combustion 5-string from you just a couple of months ago, and I haven't played anything else since because it's wonderful. I absolutely love it. Took a bit of because it's quite a beast, isn't it? It's a heavy, big bass. So it took a bit of getting used to, especially up the top. I found I was kind of, because if you haven't seen them, they've got fan frets. Up the top, I found I was overshooting a little bit. So that just took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But the sound, the build quality is absolutely brilliant. But I'm very fickle with guitars. You know, I'm sure most bass players are. I get very excited about various things. Sandberg, I've got a number of Sandberg basses.
Yep.
I've got a California VM, and I've got another one which was like one of them master built ones, which I changed to a fretless. I had the 48. I've also got I don't know, something else. But then they were kind enough. Holger, who owns Sandberg, he was very kind enough to do a signature model for me, which was basically a VM, but with specific pickups and a specific paint job, and we called it the Enigma bass.
Yeah, they look great.
And they're really nice basses.
Yeah, they are.
And I've got a prototype one of that as well, which I play a lot. And that's basically the same thing without the Go Faster racing stripes.
Oh, okay.
But I've also got a Status, which I got from Rob Green a couple of years back. He built that for me. I went and chose the wood, which was a lovely experience with Rob Green. If you've never met Rob Green, he is the nicest man ever. Rob, love you. I do. Always have. You're such a handsome man. I've also got a Jazz 5, which I bought in the 90s, I guess. Jazz 4. I've got a Gretsch Electromatic, which can't use it all the time, but I've got a set of flats on it, and in the studio it's just got a monstrous sound.
Big old sound.
Absolutely lovely. I've got an Epiphone EB3 because every now and again I do gigs doing Cream stuff, and that's
wicked.
You become Jack Bruce for the evening.
Do you sing on that as well?
I do, yeah.
Wicked.
And not lead vocals, you wouldn't want to hear that. What else have I got? I've got a Music Man Stingray fretless. I worked with Paul Young for a few years, and if you're going to do Pinot, you've got to have a Stingray fretless.
Nothing else does it.
No.
Yeah.
And I've got a Music Man 5, a Music Man Sterling 5, which is okay.
Yeah.
I've still got my old Matsumoto Jazz from way back.
Yeah.
I think I've got about 17 basses in all.
Covering a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try and sort of pick up things that are going to give me as much of a. Oh, and I've got an amazing precision. Years ago, I was out in Japan with Thunder, and they always supply. We didn't take basses out there. They would supply us with something, and they supplied me with this 1960s incredibly beat up precision. And I absolutely fell in love with it, and there was no way I was going to be able to afford it, or afford the import tax. So I just took loads and loads of photos of it, and then a luthier, a good friend of mine, Dan McPherson, who lived in Southend at the time, he's now in Canada. I took the photos to him and I said, "Can you build me this?" Which he did, and honestly, it is just the most amazing bass. Most amazing precision. It looks like a beat up 1964, and I've got black flat wound, nylon wound strings on it, and it just sound is unbelievable.
Absolutely amazing. So why the Dingwall? What made you to go for that?
It was pretty.
Yeah.
No, actually, the reason I was looking was because a couple of my students at BIMM had got fanfret basses, and I hadn't. So I thought I should maybe just have one, so that I can just be able to speak, with authority about them. And it was pretty.
Yeah, 100%.
And it was a different sound. It was completely different to anything else I'd got. So I fancied another bass. You don't have to have a reason to buy a bass. No, for God's sake, look around here.
Surrounded by them, aren't we?
Oh, and I've got a Rickenbacker as well.
Yeah.
And I bought that because when I was a kid, I was a massive Chris Squire fan, and I always that was the bass I wanted. Of any other bass, I wanted a Rickenbacker. And it was years before I was able to buy one. And I finally got one around 2010, I think it was. And I plugged it in. I'm going to be Chris Squire. And it's like, no, this doesn't sound like Chris Squire at all. Why doesn't it? And it was many years after that I discovered the reason he gets his sound is the Rico sound. I'm sure everybody knows this. The Rico sound output, which is basically a stereo out. You get a stereo lead, plug one into a guitar amp, which is one, which will be the neck pickup, the bridge pickup, sorry, into a guitar amp with overdrive.
Yeah.
Neck pickup goes into a bass amp. Then you sound like Chris Squire.
Yeah. Because interestingly, his bass originally only had the one output. It was one of the import ones, so it had the dots on the neck and no binding and stuff. And I think he added that after. Did
he still sound like that? So if he did sound like that before he had the stereo thing, then my whole story is completely pointless.
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I'm not too sure if he did that before he was recorded with Yes and all that stuff. Maybe, I don't know.
But as again, as we were discussing before, it's all in the fingers.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to sound like somebody, you can use all the same gear, your same guitar, same lead, same amp, same strings, everything. You're not going to sound like them unless you're them, because it's all in the fingers. You know, like John Entwistle. You'll never sound like John Entwistle because you're not him. You know, you can try, but it's never going to sound quite like him.
I mean, the gear gets you like halfway there, doesn't it? Kind of
it does. Like, it does, absolutely.
The sort of ballpark, in a way, you know. You can't be like, oh, I want to sound like that alembic period of John Entwistle and come up with a Hofner with flats. It's just not going to work, is it?
No, absolutely.
But the same with the technique as well. That will only get you. It's a good bit of both, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So what's the rest of the year looking like for you then?
Busy actually. In a couple of weeks' time, I go out to Australia with Taiketo to do 3 shows, which is going to be absolutely grueling. Fly out, 3 shows. Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, I'm not sure if it's in that order, it doesn't really matter.
No.
Fly straight back, 2 days off, and then we're supporting Uriah Heep on their UK tour, which will be great because we're doing the Palladium. I'm looking forward to that. Birmingham Symphony Hall, some really, really nice venues. Yeah. Then we got a few days, I think, and then or maybe a week or so, and then we go to Miami to do the Monsters of Rock cruise, which is great fun.
How long's that on for?
That's only 5 days, but wife and I are flying out a bit early, just to have a few days.
Yeah, wicked.
And then early April, hopefully we're in the studio with Taiketo doing our new album, which will be the first one for a few years. We're writing it at the moment, demoing it at the moment. So that'll be interesting. But there's a lot going on with Taiketo. There seems to be a bit of a resurgence, a bit of a buzz in the industry. We've done a lot of good shows, so that's good. More with Guitar Heads. We got some more shows later on in the year. We got 3 at a place called the Music and Arts Centre in Barnoldswick.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Never heard of it.
It's the most unique, smallest gig probably you'll ever play. I would say the bar is probably not much bigger than this.
Really?
And the stage area that you're playing is probably the same size as this. So you have to have tiny gear and you have to play really, really quiet. And the people are literally sat there.
Yeah, I love those
and
gigs.
it only holds like 60 odd people, I think. But if you can play at that level, it's just brilliant. Loads of, I think they have bands there 7 nights a week. Everybody plays there. It's fantastic.
So how do you think that compares to, obviously you said you've done Wembley and all them. How does it feel different for you? Or does it?
It's always about the audience.
Yeah.
You know, Wembley Arena is actually a horrific place to play because I don't know if you know, it used to be the Empire Pool.
Yeah.
And the pool is still there.
Is it?
So under the floor, there's a massive great hole where the pool was.
Wow, okay.
Which is why it sounds so bloody awful. Why the bass is always rumbling around.
Wow.
It's just a hole.
I didn't know
and
that.
I went down and had a look years ago, and they got these big sheets of stuff hanging down to try and sort of stop the reflections.
Yeah.
But as soon as you make any amount of noise in there, especially bottom end, it just goes backwards and forwards.
Wow.
So that's why it sounds so shit in Wembley.
Yeah.
But, you know, doing big gigs, doing like big festivals like Wacken and download, 90,000 odd people. You only, especially me with my bad eyesight, you only see the first few, the whites of their eyes of the first few lines of the audience. Then the rest of them are just like a blur. So you don't really get the the feeling that you're playing to that many people.
Yeah.
You know? And every gig is different, and it's always about the audience. You know, you can play to 1,000 people and it'd be awful. You can play for 5 people and it could be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, I've got no preferences. I'll go and play to anyone. You know, I love it. I always say to anyone who doesn't know much about the music business, it is the best job in the world, as you know.
Yeah.
You know, you go out, you're making people happy, you're doing what you love, and you're getting paid for it sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And I get as much of a thrill picking up a bass guitar today as I did 50 years ago when I first picked one up.
Yeah.
And you can't say better than that.
No,
really,
you can't. Beats digging holes in the road, they say.
I've dug a few good holes.
Well, thanks for coming in.
Mate,
Been great to see
it was a pleasure.
Great to see you, man.